This lesson will cover chapter 27 of the book of First Chronicles. And these last chapters in Chronicles, David is preparing the nation, ordering the priests, the musicians, the security guards, and this chapter will order the military and the administrative structure, preparing for his son Solomon to take the throne. Solomon, when he took the throne, was only 19 years old. Chapter 27, verse 1, and it reads, Now the children of Israel, after their number, to wit, the chief fathers and captains of thousands and hundreds, and their officers that served the king in any manner of the courses, which came in and went out month by month throughout all the months of the year of every course, were 24,000. So if you multiply that, you will see that there were 288,000 military persons serving in time of peace. Of course, that army could get to 1 million or 1.5 million in a time of war. And those fathers and captains, chief fathers, those would have been the tribal princes or the head of a particular tribe. Now, there were 3 levels of military mighty men in David's camp. The first order, a second, and a third. There are 3 here who are mentioned and who are in that very first, and we will cover them. In verse 2, over the first course for the first month was Dashobeam, the son of Zabdiel, and in his course were 24,000. This person, Jashobeam, was one of these top-level mightiest men, and he was with David all the way back to Ziklag. If you skip down to verse 4, we will pick up another of these mighty men from the first level. And over the course of the second month was Dodai, an Ahoite, and of his course was Mikloth, also the ruler, and in his course likewise were 24,000. And if go to verse 7, and it reads, The 4th captain for the 4th month was Asahel, the brother of Joab, and Zebediah his son after him, and in his course were 24,000. Joab was a nephew of David, the son of his sister, and Joab served as his commanding general throughout the time of David. Joab was a very critical part in David's reign. 16 through 22 will list the administrative princes. I encourage you to read it on your own, and they, of course, were encouraged to help Solomon to erect that temple. Skip up to verse 23. But David took not the number of them from 20 years old and under, because the Lord had said he would increase Israel like to the stars of the heavens. And back in time, David was seduced by Satan to number Israel, and this is what this is talking about. God didn't order the numbering, and it started at 20, and you will learn through the next verse more about this. 24. Joab, the son of Zeruiah, began to number, but he finished not, because there fell wrath for it against Israel. Neither was the number put in the account of the Chronicles of King David. That is because there were two total tribes that were left out of the numbering. It was not recorded. And in fact, David got chastised by God. He got three terrible choices: 3 years of famine, 3 months of being on the run, 3 days of a plague. He asked God to make the choice, and the choice was the plague. And so many died that an angel stopped the plague halfway through the very first day. And those previous numbers, they had been ordered by God back in the book of Numbers. They numbered from 1 month old and up, because at that time the firstborn son had to serve in the temple. And when the Levites took over the priesthood, then they could change that to 20 and under. And in fact, a family could redeem a child who had been committed to serve in the temple. But that numbering that David did and Joab conducted, Joab was fiercely against it. And there's, as I said, as the Bible said to us, there is no record of that numbering, because it was not of God. 25 through 31 are the stewards over David's personal wealth. 25. And over the king's treasures was Asmaveth, the son of Adiel, and over the storehouses in the fields, in the cities, and in the villages, and in the castles was Jehonathan, the son of Uzziah. So you see there that he had managers, and 12 in all, and they were divided between treasures in Jerusalem and treasures that were outside Jerusalem. Of course, there was wealth out in the nation. 26. And over them that did the work of the field for tillage of the ground was Ezra, the son of Shelub. And he would have been over the grain. And the grain was important because it was exported, used as trade with for other countries who supplied gold and precious woods and so forth. And so the grain was going to be supervised by a steward. 27. And over the vineyards was Shimei the Ramathite. Over the increase of the vineyards for the wine cellars was Zabdi the Shifmite. So you see the eastern border there. Ramoth would have been in Benjamin, and the eastern border would have been where the wine making, and Zabdi would be over the making of the wine and getting it stored into the cellars, an important commodity for the nation. 28. And over the olive trees and the sycamore trees that were in the low plains was Baal-Hanan the Gederite, and over the cellars of oil was Joash. Now, Gederite, that's a city. That means where he was from. The oil, of course, is olive oil. Now, a sycamore is not at all like the sycamore in our side of the world. It's sycamore, and it's called a fig bulberry, and it has a heart-shaped leaf, large leaves providing a lot of shade. They would have been planted along the roadsides for travelers to rest from the heat. And the fruit is produced from the trunk on that, but it's a very sour fruit, and you have to prick it and then wait until that sour taste goes out of it, and then it is edible. So this was the same kind of tree that was in the New Testament. The little short man climbed to view Jesus, the very same kind of tree. 29. And over the herds that fed in the Sharon was Shaddai and the Sharonite, and over the herds that were in the valleys was Shaphat, the son of Adaliah. Now this is cattle and oxen here on the plain of Sharon, many herds, and you have two stewards here, and they're split geographically to divide these animals over the nation. 30. Over the camels was Obal the Ishmaelite, and over the asses was Jediah the Meronothite. Did you hear that? Ishmaelite. He would have been a descendant of Ishmael, who was the offspring of Abraham and Sarah's handmaid Hagar. These folks were Arabic, and they were nomadic, and they would have certainly known how to handle camels. So he has chosen a person with great knowledge, even though he is an Ishmaelite and not an Israelite. 31. And over the flocks was Jaziz, the Hagarite. All these were the rulers of Hagarite. All these were the rulers of the substance which was King David's. So they were over the flocks. That would be the goats and the sheep, and there would have been many of them. 32 through 34 concerns counselors, and some of them had already died before this was written. 32. Also, Jonathan, David's uncle, was a counselor, a wise man, and a scribe, and Jehiel, the son of Hachmoni, was with the king's sons. And Jonathan, that would have been, of course, his uncle, and that would have been in a royal city. And there isn't a word for uncle or nephew in the Hebrew language. And Moffat says that this Jonathan was not the uncle of David, but in truth his nephew. 33. And Ahithophel was the king's counselor, and Hushai the Archite was the king's companion. And remember that this Ahithophel was with Absalom when Absalom came against David. And he said that he would kill David if he could find him. And this Ahithophel hanged himself. 34 to complete this chapter. And after Ahithophel was Jehoiada, the son of Benaiah, and Abiathar, and the general of the king's army was Joab. And of course, that is David's nephew. Abiathar was the only survivor from Ahimelech, remember that David hid and he went into a temple or a place of worship, I should say, and he ate the showbread, and Saul came after, and 70 priests were killed, and Abiathar survived, only survivor, and he acted as high priest to David. Chapter 28, we are coming into the very last part of David's reign. Verse 1, and David assembled all the princes of Israel, the princes of the tribes, and the captains of the companies that administered to the king by course, and the captains over the 1,000, and captains over the hundreds, and the stewards over all the substance and the possessions of the king and of his sons, with the officers and with the mighty men, and with all the valiant men unto Jerusalem. So these are princes, would be the heads of families, the captains, the military captains, the stewards, and sons who would inherit these would be powerful, influential persons in the nation, which stretched from the Euphrates all the way to Egypt, the most powerful nation in the world at the time. And it was God who chose Solomon, even though he was not the firstborn of David. 2. Then David the king stood up on his feet and said, hear me, my brethren and my people. As for me, I had in mine heart to build a house of rest for the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and for the footstool of our God, and had made ready for the building. God was enthroned above the ark. And of course, David was living in a palatial place, and he looked out at the tent that held the Ark of the Covenant, and he wanted to build a house, and God said no. And he said, I will build you a house that will last forever. Of course, David's royal house on the human side was over with Zedekiah. The promise there was for Jesus, who would come through David's lineage, and that is the key of David. 4. Howbeit the Lord God of Israel chose me before all the house of my father to be king over Israel forever, for he hath chosen Judah to be the ruler, and of the house of Judah the house of my father, and among the sons of my father he liked me to make me king over all Israel. And as I said, his throne didn't last forever. It was over earthly with Zedekiah. Genesis 49, about the 8th verse, there's a blessing, Jacob's blessing on the house of Judah that will assume the kingship. 5. Howbeit the Lord God of, and of all my sons, for the Lord hath given me many sons, he hath chosen Solomon my son to sit upon the throne of the kingdom of the Lord over Israel. Now, Solomon is the child of David and Bathsheba. Another child of David and Bathsheba is named Nathan, and it is Nathan who is the ancestor of Jesus. 6. And he said unto me, Solomon thy son shall build my house and my courts, for I have chosen him to be my son, and I will be his father. And he's to build the temple the inner and the outer court. 7. Moreover, I will establish his kingdom forever if he be constant to do my commandments and my judgments as at this day. That is an if, constant, strong Hebrew if. And the same promises were made to Saul. But Saul went for advice. Instead of going to God, he went to a fortune teller and a necromancer, a person who could, what we call, throw a voice, ventriloquist. And Solomon, unfortunately, is not going to follow through with this promise. He had almost 1,000 wives and concubines, and they put their altars in on Mount Olive and the other mountain, and altars to their false god. And Solomon himself even went up to worship. And of course, the nation split when Solomon's son Rehoboam took the throne. A non-person who was not from the house of Judah, Jeroboam, took all of the tribes except for the Levites and some Levites, the house of Benjamin and Judah, that remained in the south. The nation split, was never put together, but we are told that the stick will be in the end times put together once again. 9. Now therefore, in the sight of all Israel, the congregation of the Lord, and in the audience of our God, keep and seek all the commandments of the Lord your God, that you may possess this good land and leave it for an inheritance for your children after you forever. And this is good advice. We are to keep commandments, and it will continue to pass on. Verse 9, and thou, Solomon, my son, know that the God of thy father, and serve him with a perfect or a mature heart, and with a willing mind. For the Lord searcheth all hearts, and understandeth all the imaginations of the thoughts. If thou seek him, he will be found of thee, but if thou forsake him, he will cast thee off forever. Very good advice for all of us. And how do we seek him? We learn his word, we pray, we meditate on the word, and this would be the very good advice for us. As a note, Kings, Samuel, Chronicles would have been considered just the book of Kings. It was written on scrolls, of course. When it was translated into Greek, the Greek language took up far more space than the Hebrew, and that's how we got First Kings, Second Kings, because they ran out of scroll room. And a setter in the Hebrew, in the original scrollage, what you could use for one sitting to read. And of course, you have the 11th setter goes from First Chronicles into Second. So that is, we do know that it was not First and Second Kings, First and Second Chronicles. And of course, chapter and verse separation is a man-made idea. That's not so in the Old Testament. They don't necessarily flow one to another. You have First Peter and Second Peter. They were not one as the Chronicles 1 and 2 because they were written at different times. Uh, John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, and 1st and 2nd Corinthians. He wrote to the Corinthians at 2 different times. So that is not true of the New Testament. Verse 10. Take heed now, for the Lord hath chosen thee to build a house for the sanctuary. Be strong and do it. And he does. 11. And then David gave to Solomon his son the pattern of the porch, and of the houses thereof, and of the treasuries, and of the upper chambers thereof, and of the inner parlors thereof, and the place of the mercy seat. You see, God had written on David a blueprint for the temple. God had said exactly how it would be done. And that word pattern in the Hebrew is tabnith, and just as the tabernacle was ordered by God, the temple will be, and the Holy of Holies, and everything laid out as God wished. 12. And the pattern of all that he had by the Spirit of the courts of the house of the Lord, inner and outer, and of all the chambers round about. Those chambers round about would have been for storage, and of the treasuries of the house of God, and the treasuries of the dedicated things. So you had 2 treasures, what the house belonged to the house, and then dedicated. And you get a better description when we get to 2nd Chronicles about the temple and how it looked. But now a dedicated offering would have been something taken as a spoil in defeated from a victory, military victory, and not only the ranking officers would have contributed to this dedicated treasury, but just a low soldier would also make offering to the dedicated treasury. 13. And for the courses of the priests and the Levites, and for all the work of the service of the house of the Lord, and for all the vessels of service in the house of the Lord. Now, they had courses, and many of these Levitical priests were scattered. And if they served a course, they went to Jerusalem. And this verse is about housing for them. They would need a place to sleep and to eat and to live during that week that they were serving in the temple. 14. He gave of gold by weight for things of gold, for all instruments of all manner of service, silver also for all instruments of silver by weight, for all instruments of every kind of service. David gave real gold, it's already said, and it was available, and he would have been given designs for the bowls and the spoons and all the things that would have been used in the conduction of worship. 15. Even the weight for the candlesticks of gold, and for their lamps of gold, by weight for every candlestick, and for the lamps thereof, and for the candlesticks of silver by weight, both for the candlestick and also for the lamps thereof, according to the use of every candlestick. Now, it's not a wax candle with a wick. It would have been a bowl of olive oil with a wick in it. And of course, you know the menorah, the 8 branch. Second Chronicles, we're told that there were 10 candlesticks, 5 on the left and 5 on the right of the Holy of Holies. And the only place that silver silver's mentioned is in this chapter, and those silver candlesticks would have been lights for the porters or the gatekeepers and kind of security guards. 16. And by the weight he gave gold for the tables of showbread, and for every table, and likewise silver for the tables of silver. And the design there would have been that holding that showbread, it means the bread of face. And of course, it was where tables were used. The silver tables would have been used to prepare a thank offering, a mincha, or a meal offering. The showbread they put out on the Sabbath, and then it was replaced on the next Sabbath. 16. And by weight he gave gold for the tables of showbread for every table, and likewise silver for the tables of silver. There was a design, and I read that twice. I'm going to stop with the next verse because I wish to use the rest of the book of Chronicles so that it would all be together in a single lesson. 17 to complete this lesson. Also pure gold for the flesh hooks and the bowls and the cups, and for the golden basins he gave gold by weight for every basin, and likewise silver for weight for every basin. Basin would have been a large covered bowl, and it would be filled with water to wash a sacrifice. Now, flesh hook would have been used for these food offerings, and we learned back in 1 Samuel that 2 awful persons serving in the temple under their father Eli would use the fish hooks to get offerings and eat what persons had been offered. They were an abomination, and the priesthood was taken from Eli. In our next lesson, we will finish the book of First Chronicles, and this last chapter will end David's rule and his life. This video has been an outreach of the Essex Methodist Church in Essex, Missouri, and the Crossroads Global Methodist Church in Dexter, Missouri.